Yeah, you don't have
This
to
is
be
that
quiet.
time.
You can just normally chat.
Watermelon. Watermelon.
No, don't
watermelon.
say watermelon. No
Sorry.
fruit. No fruit. Like you either talk or don't talk, but don't say stupid fruits.
Fruits are here already. We don't need more.
Small rodent, rabbit.
Yeah, don't do anything that's repetitive. That's just have a
The
conversation.
big brown box, but
Yeah,
okay.
not
now
that
I'm
either.
thinking,
You're just
wow.
going down that path.
So Sky, I thought you were going to break into a Neil Sedaka song earlier when you were doing
That's,
your mic check there.
That's
Down doobie
That's
doo
Courtney.
down down
Courtney.
Yeah.
Courtney.
Build one or two down.
down.
So
Thanks.
pretty much on a mic check or anything else, saying the same word over and over again is a disaster. Just so we're all on the same page. So like you just don't ever want to do that. Ever want to do it for mic check? Ever want to do it for anything else? You don't repeat the same word. You don't say word. You don't say numbers either. You have to find something to say. By the way, the best P test ever was yesterday. Let's see if I can find it here real quickly. We had I just got to read a little bit of it to you before we get started. I know people are already watching on YouTube, but so we had our PA. I told him a P test is coming later this afternoon. P test is how we do audio sync. Clapping is silly, so this whole thing that people do in front of their on stage is the stupidest thing ever. And so we do it so that the stage folks, the live event people, think that we did something. So we do this. And they go, okay, that looks good. That's plus or minus 60 milliseconds. You can't tell anything from that. The clap test is worthless. And so we just do this thing to make them happy, because if we don't do it and they feel like it's off later, they'll blame us. So we do this silly little clap test, and then we do a P test, because you can only say P's in synced, right? And so you can, so you want something with lots of, so I told him it was coming. And usually people just go, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Like that's what people do. This guy wrote this. Philadelphia, I know Philadelphia isn't the best one, but Philip is a professor of problematic probability and prudent possums with pom-poms, pierced punks, profile proper, playful plutonium with pluton, and it almost makes sense. Like it's all these P's. And it's like an Alice in Wonderland P test. Anyway.
It's in Lewis Carroll land there.
It was totally, but you listen to it and you almost think it's a sentence, but it's just a whole bunch of P words, but it's not just someone reading out of the dictionary, which is the other thing people do. And so it was masterful. I think that I'll post it in Discord, because I think that we may have to adjust it with he's got Philadelphia, which doesn't make any sense, but
Needed Poughkeepsie.
Yeah, Poughkeepsie. It was, I was listening to it and I was like, where did this come from? He's like, oh, I wrote it. And I was like, this is amazing. So anyway.
P test means something different to surreptitious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We call it a P test. Anyway, hi everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, if you look down below, you'll see a link that you can join Zoom. If you're here in Zoom and wonder how all these people, we got a big panel today, all these people joined and they got here early. We really start about 5 a.m. in a meeting. If you don't, you'll need to see a link to find the meeting in the emails that you get, and then we move on to the pre-show. This is like the first breakfast and second breakfast, and then first lunch and second lunch. So we move on to the pre-show, and then from the pre-show we go into the first hour, which is the first hour is right what we're starting right now. This is open. You can ask any questions you want around media, production, all kinds of production, live production, virtual production, visual effects production, whatever you want to do there. And then the second hour is usually dedicated to something very specific. So today we're going to talk about Zoom. Tomorrow we're going to talk about, we open it up for educators, so 8 to 9. Sundays we just keep talking. We don't really have something there. And then Monday is a wild card. We're going to talk about HDR video in transport this Monday, which I would highly recommend checking out. But then Tuesdays are audio, Wednesdays are video, Thursdays are usually artist oriented in some way. We talked about concerts yesterday, and then Fridays are more production and virtual production. And next week I've twisted Andy's arm to join us to just talk about Zoom OSC. So we'll be talking about that next Friday. Obviously the other days I haven't figured out yet, so that's why I didn't mention them. Anyway, so and then next Saturday, of course, will be the focus on education. So those are the second hours. Usually in the second hour, we ask you to ask questions that have a colon, something colon. So today is Zoom. We're going to talk about Zoom. So Zoom colon is what you want to put if you have a Zoom specific question. So we're going to try to avoid Zoom questions in the first hour. They kind of took over the first hour a lot yesterday, but we'll talk about them in the second hour. And without any further delay, Bill, I suspect that we have some questions.
We do. We have a robust list of questions today, the first one of which comes from Jonas Dotel of Reutlingen and has to do with the esports world. Alex, did you see the World 2020 stream? They did a multicam with LED screens. Also, Tom Scott, not the saxophonist, did a virtual production like that with multiple cams. And then he has a couple of links to those things.
I didn't see it. Anyone else see it? I've been in production. So did it happen yesterday or this week?
It says, did you see the stream, but it didn't say when. So maybe it's ongoing. I would imagine that's a pretty long one considering it's the Worlds.
The Worlds. Yeah, I have not seen it, but I will check it out. I'm always interested. I'm always interested to see how LEDs work. Usually the LEDs can be a real challenge for cameras. You either get moire or you get compression issues. Or both, if you're not.
Be interesting to see what Tom Scott did. I understand he has like a bazillion YouTube subscribers to his channel, so he's probably been the beneficiary of everybody wanting to get their techniques and gears in front of him so that he can.
I haven't seen it, but we'll check it out. Definitely check it out. Next question.
Okay, moving on to Philip Oler of Kenosha, Kanoha, New York. Anyone else experience issues with SSD drives not being recognized by their ATEM mini when plugging it in? Need to power cycle for the green lights to show. This has been happening to me for a while and started happening after an ATEM software update.
Has anyone else seen that? I have to admit, I haven't really been recording for my ATEM minis, so I don't have I haven't used it in that capacity. Anyone else see that issue? The hard part is that for production folks, once you figure out what the fix is, then you just do it. Like, oh yeah, do it, restart, move on. Anyway, Grant.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I know that we've had problems with the T7 of the Samsung and T5 works fine. So go figure. Is it
a T7 that's the problem?
I don't know if that was what he was using.
The T7 I use a bunch of T7s they actually have faster transfer rates in files that are less than 400 gigs, than the T5s, but after that they're not very good. so and they don't handle really heavy sustained transfers. So that's why I think it's a caching issue. Go ahead, Chris.
I know that the T5 is like the darling child, but when I first set up my ISO, I started using this thing. It's a little heat synced box, and if I open it, it reveals it has a single NVMe chip in it. Mm-hmm. And I bought the box because I accidentally bought one extra NVMe when I was buying some NVMe chips. Shame. So I bought this thing, and it's pretty cool. I mean, it has one terabyte chip in it, or gigabyte,
terabyte.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah, we use those we're using those
on
1
megabyte.
1 meg. It's 1 megabyte. It records less than a frame.
I miss my 1.44 floppies.
Yeah, exactly. We're using those on the Blackmagic on our Ursas this week. So those are we're using the MVE memory chips. So we use those as external US. These are G2. These are the Ursa 4.6 G2s that have a USB-C connector on them, and we're using exactly what you're talking about there. They're 2 terabyte memory cards. The challenge that we still haven't quite solved is heat dissipation. So we have gone through, I think, 2 cases now where the cases will work most of the time, but if you I don't think that one will work. I'm just looking at it based on our experience. We have ones with fins on them, and if we do we have all these fins and heat sinks for the memory card, and they're overheating at about 20 minutes when recording Blackmagic RAW 3.1. Now, if we go to Apple ProRes 422 HQ, they're fine. Like they work forever. It's just when you push the chip as hard as it can go, we haven't solved that problem yet. But to your point, Chris, they're great, and I'm probably going to end up moving to more of them because they're 900. The ones we're using are 900 megs a second instead of 500 with the T5. So they're incredibly fast. Super. I had 6 of them in my bag, and they're really easy. They're cost effective, so they're a really good solution. What the challenge that I'm putting out for this group is what we haven't figured out is heat dissipation at maximum transfer speed. is still a problem for us that we haven't solved. Go ahead, Chris, and then
Yeah.
Raphael.
You know, heat dissipation is a real issue that a lot of people don't think about. I'm constantly griping about those LaCie rugged drives.
Yeah.
They're plastic, they're wrapped in an insulator, rubber, and they have no fans. It's the trifecta of how to destroy a hard drive.
Yeah. Go ahead, Raphael, and then George.
Well, one of the issues with the T7 might be that they are QLC and NAND flash instead of TLC like the T5 were.
Right.
And we've seen in the IT world, we've seen this kind of issues with long-term data transfer to the QLC stuff.
Go ahead, George.
So this is a good question about the heat, because my office is definitely turning into a hot box, and the Dell 3930, I just took out my dual card out of it because I felt like it's being so close to the graphics card, it was just generating so much heat. So I put it back into external enclosure because I was definitely having some issues with the actual Decklink Duo running hot and dropping. Since I took it out and put it back into the enclosure, I'm not having those issues anymore.
Now, I'm not recommending this, but I have heard people with drop ceilings put an air conditioner in their office and drop it down. It's a horrible idea, but there might be one in my office. Anyway, go ahead, Mike.
Chris Fenwick, I sold those drives for 5 years in the Apple Store, and I resent that. It was my go-to drive, and I've been editing with them for years and years. So shame on you.
I just don't.
They have totally bagged me in the past completely. I showed up on a job. They handed, here, just cut on this, and at about 1 o'clock in the morning, the whole thing locked up on me.
We don't cut off of them. We've used them as throwaway transfer drives, but that's about all we use them for, and they work great for that. Although we don't use spinning drives anymore, ever. Anyway, next question.
Moving on to Raphael Jacquois of Grenoble. Recommendations for Mac OS supported touchscreen to use with the Blackmagic design software.
Mac support most touchscreens. I mean, if they do a USB interface, they should work with the Mac. There shouldn't be anything special there. Garrick, and then Oliver.
If you have an iPad, there's an app called Strata that will connect to your ATEM, and I'm not sure if it does ATEM Mini.
But you're looking for Raphael. You're looking for a screen for your Mac, not a
screen for his Mac. Oh, okay. I was thinking you could just use an iPad and connect it, and then.
Now you can use AirPlay, and then you have an iPad that not AirPlay, but what did they call it? Sidecar to turn your iPad into a touchscreen as well. Go ahead, Oliver.
Yeah, I think they removed the support for the USB touchscreens in Mojave. So you need to find some third-party driver to go with the touchscreen.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, but what I use for that is my iPad. You know, is I use my iPad in Sidecar with the. I've been using it recently with Resolve, just to put my scopes somewhere because I don't need them to. You know, I just put them up there, and it's worked really well. Next question.
Moving on, Philip Oler of Cantona, New York. My son today mentioned one of his teachers is hard to hear during remote class. He says they're using AirPods. They use WebEx. Many times I've noticed Bluetooth headphones have inferior low-quality audio when using any one of these video services. I even hear it on the news with remote guests. Are there any fixes?
Better mic. I mean, a better mic is the way to fix it. Is a $15 mic and a $15 interface. So that's, that's what makes it better. Go ahead, Chris.
Totally agree with that. It's interesting. I've noticed, like right now, I'm listening on my AirPods, but I'm still using, my microphone. When I ask the AirPods to do both talk and listen, the audio quality drops because it's like it's only got so much space it can put noise through, and if it's going one way, it's fine. If it has to go both ways, it's not as good.
I mean, I find that AirPods are better than talking across the room to your laptop, but just a little. Like it's not, and so that's the hard part. I do hope that when we get another round of stimulus, which in our country will probably happen in the spring, that we think about not buying plexiglass and buying more mics for the teachers. You know, so it would be more useful for the teachers to actually have something they could use rather than the silliness that we spent the money on the last one. But that's what we're dealing with, is teachers not being properly equipped for what they're actually doing as opposed to what they wish they were doing. So you know, hope is not a strategy. All right, next question.
James
Before
Babbitt.
you do, Bill,
Oh,
Bill,
yeah.
Bill,
Mhm.
before you do,
Yeah.
I'm noticing that there are questions in Mukana that have completely disappeared. I know I had one, Victor had one, and there are a whole bunch more. I don't know if somebody's been moving them around. They're not in the answered. Just so you know.
Okay. And in general, we'll deal with things between shows, especially when we got a bunch of stuff. So don't interrupt the show for that. All right, we'll just keep working. We'll do the best
Moving
we can.
along.
Yep.
James Babbitt of San Diego has our next question. I use a MacBook Pro and I'm looking for a computer monitor. What sizes and specs work the best? Maybe 32-inch, 4K, UHD, HDMI, DisplayPort, headphone jack, and FreeSync. The power brick may not. I guess he doesn't want it with a 3-wire C13 connector. So you want a 2-wire or 2-prong connector like the small laptop plugs. Maybe he doesn't have a grounded outlet.
It said may not have it. Let's see. Hold on.
Yeah, I don't know whether that's the preclusion.
I don't think that's a real request. I just I for a second monitor, I mean, I tend to not go bigger than 28. You know, like it's just becomes cumbersome. You know, so I think that, you know, 24 and 28 are kind of the second monitors, and the 28s even those to me are a little heavy as a second monitor, unless it's like an HDR preview screen. I have bigger ones for 55s for those, but outside of that, I stick with 24s mostly just because they're easier to put on arms that I can move around. As if I haven't mentioned it before, I like arms, so I like to be able to adjust where the monitor actually is, not have it sitting somewhere. So 24s tend to be easier there, and then I still would recommend make sure you have easy mount, so you put it on an arm, and make sure you have a C13 so that you can you don't lose the cable. Don't ever buy a monitor with a external power supply, because you will eventually lose it, and then you'll be wandering around trying to figure out what happened to it. You won't be able to use it anymore. Go ahead, TJ. Not that I'm bitter or that's ever happened to me.
Wholeheartedly agree on that. Don't get a monitor with a power brick like the Apple Cinema display used to have. But I tend to go 30-inch monitors as sort of my minimum. Okay. But I don't use arms, and so everything's sitting on a desk.
We use a lot of those Amazon arms. The Amazon dual arm, they have I don't know how much they have, $200 and some dollars, but we use that because they're really easy to put together and they're really strong, and we throw them into big, you know, so when we show up at a location, we also oftentimes bring our own 6-foot tables that are wooden, so that we know that they're going to clamp on well, and we clamp those on, and they kind of clamp onto everything and just work. So I think that's probably why I spend so much time on that. And then the big thing with the C13 is it means you can be anywhere in the world and find a C13 at the hardware store. You know, you don't have to find anything special. Every hardware store has them, I think. Everyone that I've ever seen in Africa, and Switzerland, Australia, they all have that one cable. Next question.
Moving along, Jonas Dotel is back from Reutlingen. Is there a Zoom as a service web service that hosts Zoom machines? I can then get the multi-view or control.
Let's bump that one to the second hour.
Okay.
Has Zoom on it. Even if we'll move all the questions for Zoom in the second hour.
Okay, let me move that over. Oops, it's not letting me, probably because I haven't done that, and then I can do that. All right, fair enough. We're going to move on to Tony Adamopoulos' question from Missouri. I've been editing video with iMovie on an iPad. When I move to macOS for video editing, what should I use? I have no experience with any of the Mac options.
Go ahead, TJ.
iMovie on the Mac. It should be similar enough to your experience on the iPad.
Yeah, I mean, if you're already comfortable with it, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think what too many people do is they say, ooh, I want to be a video editor, and they start with the most complex, most confusing, and you might be better off just saying, here's the free one, and when you hit the limit of what you can do, say, all right, what should I go to next? And the iMovie Final Cut workflow, I mean, you can actually, push a iMovie project into Final Cut. So when you've reached the top, then pluck down the $300 and you'll be happy.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, with continuity, you can actually start your first cut on your phone or on your iPad, and then theoretically you should be able to continue editing on your iMac if you got all your media synced up in iCloud.
Yep. Go ahead, Bill.
Apple has that progressive disclosure thing where you can simplify the interface in Final Cut 10, or now just Final Cut, to the point where it doesn't look that far off from iMovie. So it's a really smooth transition. And then you disclose more of the menus and more of the options. One thing I've seen people do is try to open up everything in Final Cut when they first come to it. And it can get a little confusing interface wise if you haven't gotten used to it. So start simple, move up.
Go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, second all that being said, start simple. Bill said it as you called me. So also do not start with Resolve. Grow into that, please. And understand it's a different language. Thank you.
Next question.
Moving on, this is Alton Christensen in Brooklyn. Alex mentioned an audio plugin set, not Izotope, not KVR, not Waves, that he thought was very impressive. It's not one I had heard of before and haven't been able to find it in the chat links yet. I would appreciate a reminder of what it was. Is anybody
for some cleanup that I've done, there's like, if I can't get Izotope to work, I use a plugin called Unveil by Synaptic. Synaptic is the one I think that I've mentioned in the past, and Unveil is kind of I don't use it all the time. It doesn't work all the time for what I'm doing, but when it works, it works. So it's one of those things. I think it's pretty expensive. I can't remember what I paid for it, but it was like $1,000 or something, or 800 or something in that range, or 1,500. I don't remember what the number was. It was a long time ago, but when you need it, you need it. For cleaning stuff up, but it's not something I use every day, but it is a pretty cool tool for removing. I've removed incredible amounts of echo from a room using that software where I couldn't get Izotope to pull off the same trick. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, Unveil is 380 US, 379 US.
I think it went down. I think at some point it was really expensive.
if you get the entire suite, I think it's around 2,000 or something.
Maybe that's what I got. Yeah. And they now sell, or they're going to be selling Spectre. They bought the Spectre code after it went through the trials and tribulations. And so if you used to have Spectre, this is the audio scopes that I like. It's just I've never found ones that are quite as good as Spectre, but then it disappeared because of some disagreements among the developers. I know that no one ever has heard of that before. Anyway, and so then it disappeared, and somehow Synaptic ended up with it. So if you have an old code for Synaptic and you send it to them, they'll send you a copy of it. And I think they're going to publish it again if they haven't already. But I know that I got it back there, and it just has more scopes and a better set of controls for scopes than anything else I've used. Next question.
Next question is from Tony Adamopoulos in Missouri. What does the ATEM Mini Pro provide for the $300 price difference? Is it worth the cost if I'm just making short recordings and not live streaming to YouTube?
It gives you a multi-view and you can stream. So, I mean, the multi-view, I just bought a bunch of the minis, just the little minis, not the Pros, because I just need to control a camera and basic switching, and so I don't get it for everything. What I'm using right now is a Pro, but I need it for my Pro has a multi-view, and that's the reason the HDMI out is a multi-view, and that's the thing that distinguishes it. Any other big advantages that people see? I think it's the multi-view and being able to stream are the two things. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, being able to stream.
Yep.
Yeah.
Doesn't it also have that port for a hard drive, or a thumb drive, so you can keep your master on the thumb drive? So that's another little one.
If you're going to do presentations into something like Zoom, or very simple switching that you need, it's like a very professional presentation tool. The $299 one is perfect for that. You don't need that multi-view. You can just tap on things, and so it's very, very valid for that. If you're going to send it out as just a control unit for a 6K, it's useful for that. You don't want to pay the extra money. But if you're going to actually do real live streaming, I would say that the Pro is useful. Courtney, did you have your hand up? And then Grant.
Yeah, I was just going to say it ends up being the same price, but there's also a monitor that you can get it at TV store that I bought one of that has 4 HDMI inputs that gives you a multi-view if you have the non-Pro version. But for this, it's about the same price as increasing to the Pro version. So,
go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I'd just say that I've been using it to stream just some little shows, and it's perfect. Works rock solid. I can send a 1080 p at 30 frames and 6 meg stream. Then on the multi-view, you have a really nice little monitor that tells you exactly what the bit rate is at the time, and it works really, really well.
For small edits, by the way, something we've used for years is that, QuickTime will take a video in. So you can do this kind of weird thing with if you need the multi-view, where you can have the HDMI go into like a mini recorder and then go into your computer and have your Zoom running or whatever. You need to make sure you've got enough power. But then you can have a little window in the same window as your software that is your multi-view, and then be sending your program out or stream out wherever you want. But it can all be in the same control that you're using. Sometimes we found that to be useful when we didn't have little monitors. Next question.
Next one comes from Jeff Francis here in the panel from Columbia, South Carolina. I want to find and pull hashtag pics from Instagram and Facebook and put them into a PIP, picture-in-picture, in a YouTube live stream with the ability to pick and choose to remove inappropriate pics. Clever ideas from the panel. I think it says also a note here, show us your ugly Christmas sweaters. That's a return from before. Yeah. I remember that question.
Yeah, we asked Jeff to ask it again because it was at the end of yesterday. So does anyone have anything that they've been using for Instagram? I know that we have an internal tool that just you can do something that will go into Instagram in the API and just search for a hashtag. You can do that with Twitter, and you can also do it eventually. I mean, you can do it also with YouTube and Facebook, and so. We grab it that way. So I haven't needed an external tool for a while. Go ahead, Sky, and then Jeffrey.
I'll pass. I'm how to create them. We're trying LumaFusion.
Yeah. Does it grab them? Will it grab Instagram links? Or
we're still experimenting. Sorry.
Okay, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
So somebody suggested something yesterday before we moved on, but you can also WordPress has a plugin that'll do that, and then IFTTT, if this then that. I believe last time I checked had ability to put everything into like a Dropbox or something like that, so you could then put into a video.
The biggest challenge that we've had with the photos is being able to pull the photos and keep the name with them, the name and comment, with them, so that when you post it, you want to be able to say, this is the format that I want the name and comment, and this is the image, and you want to be able to format those pieces together. And I know that there are external tools that do it. I haven't used them. Go ahead, Oliver. And then Phil.
So maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, but I would just screen grab it from the browser window.
The problem is that you have the issue is, let's say, the problem we have with that is, okay, we've got 300 of them coming in an hour, and we need to be able to look at them in a grid, pick the ones that we want to use, pass them on to into a system where we can show them in a variety of different ways. And so the screen grabbing part will just be it's a manual process. What we need to be able to do is mass produce. We end up with events where we have thousands of them with a given number. So you have to be able to kind of scan through basically a grid and pick the ones that you want, and then have them published to a producer who then approves them and then sends them out to the stream. That's kind of the process that I haven't seen a lot of other people do. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, so this is something we actually do a lot with digital signage, supporting live events and concerts and stuff. If you Google Twitter walls, there's a number of digital signage software solutions that will allow moderation is the first thing. And then the second thing is an API for sort of displaying how you want it and being able to change that display and laying it out. And most of those Twitter wall software solutions will do that, and with a variety of social feeds. The other piece that you can do is vMix has a social plugin that will allow those sorts of functions that you can actually design. This is where I want the user's profile picture to go. Here's their comment and here's their post, and it'll do it with Facebook and Instagram as well.
And we've done that with comments with vMix, with also with Twitch. So right. it'll grab.
It handles a lot of different social platforms.
Yeah. Jeffrey, and then Oliver.
Wirecast does that too. So I'm going back to the IFTTT. I just tested it out. You can create a trigger, new photo with specific hashtag. Now I just put in office hours for that. And then you can add then, and you just go down here and you can find like a Dropbox or a box or anything. That way the photos will go to an area that you can then put into the video.
Powerful moderation tool is really what you need.
Yeah, it's
the step before that.
Yeah, it's the moderation, the moderation plus keeping the metadata with it. So keeping the name and the comment has to stay with that photo so that it can be displayed with it. So grabbing the photo is step one, but you still need to be able to pass it through 1 or 2 levels of moderation before it hits the screen. And those are the parts that I'm not sure are there yet. Oliver?
Yeah, so if you're talking about Twitter, we can do that also in MimoLive. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
So
can you do it with Instagram?
We had to remove Instagram recently because there's a lot of changes and it's a lot of I don't think they want to do that, so it's not easy to do. So
interesting. Yeah. Good, Phil.
I'm sorry, one last thing. We built a custom tool in Las Vegas at the Strip for one of the screens there to actually do this, but Instagram has constantly sort of disabled developers from being able to grab those hooks through either their legal terms of service or just their software, like blocking it. So they're very hostile about third parties writing tools to do that. There are still some out there, but you can't rely on them from a business standpoint. I wouldn't build your business around that because it could be gone tomorrow.
I wouldn't build you. I definitely wouldn't recommend building a business around Instagram. Twitter is a much easier API to work with in general, as Oliver can probably agree with. It's a very easy to grab onto stuff with hashtags there. If there's any way to use Twitter instead of Instagram, I would recommend it. Next question.
Moving on, Dave Guzman of San Jose says, in MimoLive, is there a way to start the program with a default document so that every time I call up MimoLive, it automatically comes up with my default document? Boy, if we only had an expert on MimoLive here in the panel, wouldn't that be really cool?
Yeah, go ahead, Oliver.
That's okay. You can actually do that. So the guys from DVE Store, Jason Jenkins, he builds a one-button studio type of thing, and once you launch MimoLive, it goes into a kiosk mode, which automatically plays full screen the document you open it with. So yeah, that's how you do it, and you can hide anything behind the playout screen.
Excellent. Oh, and by the way, let us know in the comments if you've noticed that the quality of for the attendees is much higher than it was in the past. We would like to thank all of our special friends who I don't want to call out that made that possible. It was a kind of a group effort here, but you should notice as an attendee that your resolution in Zoom is higher. But let us know if what resolutions you're seeing in the comments. Next question.
Moving on to Chuck Wojak of Concord, California. Is it possible to run a green screen feed remotely for processing and virtual set uses? What would you use? Would Streaming Bridge work, or is it better to process the green screen on site?
You can process the green off site. I would not recommend processing it after it's been compressed. But I'm really particular about green screen. But Oliver may disagree.
I do, and we're gonna do a live stream. We're gonna do a live stream on Monday or Tuesday maybe, where we're gonna show you how to use chroma keyed Mimo call into MimoLive to create a virtual discussion room.
Now I'll challenge you, Oliver, I'll send you a green screen over the internet that you can key, and then I'll key it locally, and then we just have to see which one looks better.
But try to send the video with Alpha Channel over the internet, and then we talk.
No, you don't need to do that. So what we've done in the past is we'll do keys that are local. So again, you may not be able to do this with all the things. So Oliver's solution may be good for many things, but if you're looking for the best quality, again, that's one of the things we use these ATEM minis for, is they have an incredible keyer built into them. And if you have port forwarding or they're on a VPN, you can get to them remotely. That's what we're doing with a whole bunch of kits right now, is I can get to them remotely. I can load a background. I can load, I can pull a green screen remotely. And what's coming out of that ATEM mini into Zoom is keyed footage, but I have control over that key. The person sitting in front of the camera doesn't have it.
but you can't do something like the MS Teams where they put everybody in a.
Who cares about that? That's
virtual-
stupid. Like, I'm sorry, that's a dumb idea.
Well,
It's a dumb idea. Like I'm sorry, it's dumb. Like it's
yeah, but there's like there was this interview for Oprah with Barack Obama where they had Barack was somewhere else.
I can
and
tear
then
that
they
one
put
apart
them-
too. So like I watched that one.
It's entertainment. It's like,
sure. It's people trying to stay relevant with their equipment. So anyway, they're trying to hang on to old stuff. I mean, the thing is that conversation would have been better if they hadn't encumbered it with a bunch of people in a green screen. You could tell that Obama was raising his voice because of the way that that it was a different tone and a different way of being because of he's in a green screen. She's not really there. And it's just a whole bunch of people and things and technology. He would have had a more authentic conversation with her in this format that we have right now than what he had if they had put a teleprompter right in front of him and had him talk straight into it with a nice background, which he's capable of, he's got a great team, so he would have looked great. He would have sounded great. The thing we just have to always keep on reminding ourselves is how do we have authentic communication with each other, not how do we do all this whiz bang, and I come from whiz bang, like that's what I got into is visual effects, but we have so many people trying to create goofy technology, and what we need to do is be able to talk to each other, effectively, and that's what we just keep on. We just, and all these event companies and everybody else is always trying to figure out how do we do something that looks cooler, but we just want to, but it is what looks cool is great audio, great video, great lighting, and a real conversation, is what's going to matter. And it's the reason I think that, people here keep on coming back is because we are having great conversations, as a group, and I think that, but I think that conversation with Oprah is a perfect example of all the things that are wrong with what people are doing, not the things that are right. And I get that they want, they had all the money and they wanted to do all the things, but you look at again, I'll talk about Apple's keynotes, which are an incredible budget, but they're making executives do way more than they're capable of doing. And so it feels cardboardy. I mean, these are some of the people that in those videos are people that I've met, and they are much more interesting in person than they were in that video, and the thing is they've wrung out the authenticity to get an effect, and so and that's why it's part of why I don't like virtual backgrounds. It's part of why I don't, I kind of push up against all that stuff, is because we need to get back to that atom of how do we have authentic communications online, because that's what's missing. Like when people are saying they're tired of Zoom, they want to get connected to other people are connected in this group because we figured that part out, and we are doing good ball handling skills. We have good audio, we have good video, and that makes it easier to be part of it. But we're not doing a bunch of crazy stuff, and we have average view times inside of Zoom that YouTube and Facebook would write case studies on. Like if they saw that, average view time inside of Zoom in our show is over 90 minutes. Average view time on Facebook for most of our events was 28 seconds. So there's, it isn't coming from, it's not coming from a bunch of special effects or anything else. It's just coming from good ball handling skills and good communication. And and so all the goofy stuff that Microsoft's doing with put everybody in the thing, it's like, that's all a bunch of extra work. And what Zoom has gotten good at is giving us the tools to allow us to just have a good conversation, and they're doing a bunch of other funny little things too. And there are things we want to do. We want to breakout rooms would be great, in webinars, but those kinds of things are staying really focused on what makes a difference in communication and community, not, hocus pocus. It would take us a long way. So I apologize for attacking that, but I just really, it's a thought process that I'm obviously have a strong opinion about. Anyway, next question. Go ahead, Chris. Okay, Chris, and then we'll move to the next question.
To kind of back up a little bit before your sermon, which is good. No complaints. No complaints. You were talking about the kit and we were talking about the minis and the cameras and this stuff. Do you have any aversion to sharing how you send all that stuff out? Are you pre-wiring anything? Is it a spaghetti factory, or how do you do that? And if now's not the right time, we can move on.
We're moving towards boxes, but we're still kind of halfway between a self-contained box and some spaghetti. You know, a lot of education. So a video that goes with it, a PDF that goes with it, a call before the show that goes with it. You know, there's a whole bunch of hand holding and so on and so forth that we work on, and it's slowly evolving. And we try to figure out, but we're trying to think about, especially for the level of people that we're sending this to, we're constantly thinking about how do we surprise them? You know, they open it up, it should look great. You know, like, wow, this is cool. And then they put it together. Wow, that was easy. Wow, this is cool. I look great. And I sound great. And how do we, you know, and we're looking for everything to shave off all the things that make that hard. You know, and so we combine things where we can and leave things open where we have to. You know, that's the kind of, and we keep on looking for, you know, we're slowly, you know, I think we've, like right now I'm using 2 Nanlite. I'm testing these, and I think we're going to keep them. These are 2 Nanlite 68Bs, which are the bigger ones look better, but they're harder to put up. So the 100s and 200s are really cool, but they're really too big. So the 68s are the right size. And then we found these ProMaster, which is a cheap brand, but they make this one LS-CT or CT-LS. I'm about to sell out their brand, so then go buy them now before everybody buys them. But that stand is the best stand for a light. You know, like it is because it's just easy, it's light, small. And then, so you're always thinking about all the little things that just make everything just a little bit easier for them. And every kit we do is better than the last one. You know, it's like slightly smoother. I do hope to get to a point where we have a PTZ head with a Blackmagic camera, and it all comes in a box and you just set it down and make it go. And I have friends that Phil and I both know, Damon does this already. He has one. I just want it different camera quality. so that's the only thing that's distinct, you know, is the depth of field for me, and then I need log footage on mine. So these kinds of kits already exist that are built for broadcast, and we should get Damon in here sometime to talk about them, but his kits. But he's got that thing dialed all the way in. If you're a broadcaster, I just need a slightly different camera set, but otherwise I'd be using his. Next question.
Moving on to Jeffrey Reyes of the Bronx. Alex, what is your personal opinion? Do you prefer the all-in-one form factor like an iMac, or do you prefer getting separate HDMI displays attached to something like a Mac Mini or a Mac Pro? Which makes upgrading easier?
When you're buying Apple products, you're not really thinking about upgrades except for Mac Pro. Go ahead, TJ.
I've been a fan of having external monitors way back forever. And I like that because if I do swap in a different computer, I don't have to buy a whole new, like an iMac, I don't have to buy a whole new display and get that. The current displays I have work, I keep them going.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and if you like upgrading, you just get a PC and an iMac. You put them together on a KVM to a single monitor, and then you can switch back and forth to them with a single keystroke.
Yeah, I like iMacs because I can they just work. Like, you have a keyboard and a computer, you set it down somewhere and go, and there's no wiring. And so I do like those. I use tons of Mac Minis because I love to use them as glue, and we put them into racks. If a Mac Mini got a half an inch taller, I probably wouldn't use them. Because they, like literally, like every time they come with a new one, I'm like, I hope they don't break the 1U height rule, right? Because being able to drop 2 of those into a 1U rack is it's how all my Mac Minis are set up, is in 2U, 2 per U in some rack somewhere. So
how do you attach it? How do you attach it to the shelf? You just like tape it down, or is there a clamp?
Sonnet makes cases for them. So Sonnet, okay. So we put them into Sonnet, has ones, and they even have a little thing where you push the button in the front and it can start the Mac Mini in the back. So it's like a so they're actually quite nice. The Sonnet things we just buy Sonnets with them. I mean, you just kind of assume I'm going to buy 2 Mac Minis and 1 Sonnet for every rack. They're great. Next question.
Well, I have I think this is not on the Zoom side. George Kennedy has posted, did anyone try the new AWS EC2 Mac Instances? It was a late coming in question, but got a lot of votes.
Go ahead, George.
So at my Amazon's invent conference, they launched Mac Minis as an instance. Right now, it's really geared towards developers, but it's just a 6-core i7. But they are gonna switch them over to M1s at some point next year. I saw Tucker in the chat said he gave it a go also. I only was able to SSH into it, but Tucker's also saying it's a hard setup. But it's good to know that it's there and it's coming. It's probably going to be on the consumer side at some point next year.
Go ahead, Grant.
I've been playing with it today, so I've actually just I had some problems with it as George said, you couldn't do anything but SSH. So from the terminal, you have to enable screen sharing, and then you set the password, and then you can do a remote desktop.
It's not exactly like plug and play yet.
No, and so I've got it going. I'm playing with it at the moment, and the first thing I did was I was interested to see if they were just using the 1 gig network card. It reports as a 1 gig network card, but as soon as you do a speed test, you get 5 gig down and 2 gig up on a speedtest.net. So they're saying that it's actually a 25 gig, which is common for AWS. So so now I'm sort of playing, and the next thing to do is install a Zoom room on it.
Yeah.
See what happens.
So just so it is $26 for 24 hours. So make sure you bring it down. It's costly.
$1 an hour. Yeah, a little over $1 an hour.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eric, really quickly. We're gonna move. We're kind of in a speed round now. Oh, you're silent. Nope, can't hear you, Eric. Nope. All right, we got to move on. Next question.
Okay, moving on. Ricardo Hicks of Raleigh, North Carolina. Any ideas for assisting a virtual presenter who's blind? I've accommodated hearing impaired with interpreters, but I've never done any assistance for the blind. What would you suggest?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I'm just going to suggest most of my charity work in the last maybe 15 years of my career in Phoenix was with a group called Sun Sounds, who was visually impaired. We helped fund them and ran festivals to raise money. And the most important thing anybody ever told me in that realm was consider the person first. It's a person who is blind, not a blind person. And in that respect, if you're trying to figure out how to assist somebody, ask them. Treat them like you treat anybody else and say, can I help in this way? And let them have the agency to decide what they want in terms of assistance or not need in terms of assistance. I just thought I'd pass that along. Person first.
Yeah, I think that would be hard. I think it's just a matter of figuring out how to get it set up. I mean, I think that's the big thing as far if they're going to be on video. Are they on video, Ricardo?
They will be, yes. They'll be on video.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be I'm sure that they're used to getting on the computer, for what they're doing is, obviously the challenge is going to be framing. If they have someone else in that sense, I would probably look for seeing if they have another family member that can help you just get the framing set up. I think outside of that, that's, a Brio goes a long way as far as a webcam, because you can request control of it and move it around a little bit. And we find that useful for everybody. So that's so if we're trying to reframe things, we tend to want to use a Brio. Go ahead, Jeff, and then Grant, and then we'll move on pretty quick because we gotta move.
I imagine if they're using a computer, they've got something like VoiceOver giving them computer interface. If you can get that into a separate audio feed with comms coming from the remote location, that way you can talk to them, they can get that in their ear, and then you don't have that blending into the audio feed that you're trying to get back from that virtual presentation. Then you can give them verbal cues on things as well as everything they get from the computer interface through VoiceOver.
Yep, go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, as part of my work as a sound engineer for a cappella concerts that I do, we often get blind people coming to those concerts, and I always go out of my way to introduce myself often before and after the concert, because I really value their feedback. And so I like them to know I'm the guy who's making the sound that you're listening to, and that's what you're listening to. You're experiencing the whole event through my work. And so I love to know what they have. So anyway, my point is getting audio right for them is a good idea.
Yeah, they're going to be a lot touchier about the audio. With anybody, again, the way we do a lot of our connections, and with anybody that we think is going to be a problem, the point-to-point connections, of figuring out a way to have a point-to-point connection with them before they go into Zoom or before they go into the event, with anyone that might have technical trouble across any lines, is really useful, because it means that you can sort out problems with them and not do it in front of everybody. So, and that's with, I mean, we prefer that with absolutely every connection that we do. That's why most of our main events don't have shared experiences. We control all the point-to-points on our end, so that we can deal with technical issues with anybody without having to do it in front of everybody. Next question.
Moving on to Chuck Wojak of Concord, California. I just forced myself to edit a whole project in Resolve 17. I was impressed and wondering if any tips for workflow are coming from, for a workflow for those coming from Premiere into Resolve 17.
We are going to I just have to get the scheduling done, but we're about to embark on a ton of Resolve discussions, just because I think that's going to be important for us to know how to use it next year. So I don't have any things specific for folks here, other than to say that we got a lot of training coming to get people up to speed. Next question.
Moving on, next question comes to us from Victor on the panel, who asks, he's going to install Dante on an X32 today. Does he need to set up things in the Dante controller first, or the Dante Virtual Soundcard?
Go ahead, Jeff, and then Mickey.
So Dante Virtual Soundcard, you need to install and authorize, and then tell it your proper Ethernet interface, and then turn it on for however many channels you want. Once you do that, then it will appear in Dante Controller. Until you actually start the Dante Virtual Soundcard, it doesn't appear in Dante Controller. As far as the order of things, that doesn't matter. Plug them all in. As they appear on the Dante network, Dante Controller will show them. And remember that all the settings you make in Dante Controller are stored in the Dante chips themselves on the individual interfaces. So you don't need to have Dante Controller running for audio to pass. It's just to set things up. So it makes a subscription from a sender to a receiver. And once that's there, the sender knows to send to the receiver all the time.
Real quick, Victor, and then Mickey, real fast.
Does the Virtual Soundcard have to be the application on all the time for it to work, or you just start it and then you can shut off the application?
It will stay running once you start it. So you can close the app and it's still running.
Can you use Wi-Fi at the same time as your wired network?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
But not for Dante.
Yeah, you can't use
Wi-Fi for other things, but not for Dante.
Yep. Mickey?
Yeah, and if you are running your Dante network on a separate VLAN, make sure that if you're not using the HCP, it would be best if you assign static IP addresses, so that for easier troubleshooting. And yeah, ideally, it should be on a separate VLAN.
Raphael, real quick.
You also want to have the X32 to run off the Dante clock and not the X32 clock.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Yep. Next question.
From Jeffrey Powers here in the panel in Madison, and he wants to place, I think, a big monitor behind him as you would place a green screen, and he's concerned about the lights and monitors all around reflecting into the camera view. So how do you avoid all of that when you're using that kind of background?
The biggest thing that I do is I tilt it 15 degrees down. so I put the monitor in there, and then I just tilt the monitors forward, and usually most of the reflections that you would have go away. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
It's not much of a replacing a green screen, more of just having an information monitor there. So my question is, would a bigger or smaller monitor be the better answer for something like that?
I would use I think a smaller monitor is going to be less surface area that could show up a reflection. It just depends on what you're trying to do with it. I have to admit that I've kind of moved away from that idea. So we stopped using monitors behind people a couple of years ago, just because it's a artifice from news, in my opinion. Like, if I want to show you something, I'm just going to show it to you. But we just felt like we kind of moved past that. So a couple of years ago. So I haven't done it recently, but usually we went from having monitors back there to having one big monitor back there that was a virtual background to just putting sets back there. Go ahead, Bill.
I like the way Mickey has things arranged. He's got a couple of monitors that are always in his shot when we see him on the panel, but they're at an angle. You know there's something there, but you get no reflections, and I find it kind of visually interesting.
Yeah, I do too. Next question.
Chris Fenwick of the panel, mogrt files, I guess motion graphics, right? Anyone know anything about them? Supposedly made by After Effects, but After Effects wouldn't open it. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Go ahead, Garrick.
Yeah, if it's really made in After Effects, then if you go to the file, go to Open Project and choose the mogrt, it should open up in the latest versions of After Effects.
Would you open After Effects and then go open the mogrt from inside?
Yeah, so you want to open it as a project, and then it will extract it. So a mogrt is actually just a zip file with a AE project in it if it's made in After Effects. If it's not made in After Effects, if it's made in Premiere Pro, then I'm not sure the workflow for that. But if it's made in After Effects, go to File, Open Project, choose the mogrt. It will ask you to extract it, and then you should be able to open it up and play with it.
I may be avoiding another day without Premiere in my life. Thank you.
Next question.
I hear the word mogrt, and I want to put vanilla in front of it.
Yeah, go ahead. Next question. Next question. We're running out of time.
Okay, Mike Burns is coming up next. I was playing around with a goofy green screen effects with my kids the other day. The silly built-in camera on my iMac was the only camera that works with the virtual background. Both Camlink and CAMO key were no bueno. Why is this?
I think that Apple has a bunch of security that doesn't allow many things to see those. Like if they have any UVC controls, I think if they have any way to control the camera, Apple turns them off. You probably saw a gray screen. Is that what you saw? And you had to restart the computer to get back?
Yeah, no. So basically, it only worked with the iMac camera. The other ones did not work. In the virtual effects tab, you can hit green screen, but then everything just went to crap because I don't have a green screen. But it worked pretty well with the iMac camera. But on the other ones, it was.
Oh, so it only worked on the iMac camera, but not external cameras.
Yeah, it was the weirdest thing.
That's the opposite of what I'd expect. I don't have an answer. Does anyone else have an answer? Sorry, you stumped us. Stumped us on that one.
Well, that's a good thing. I'm going to take pride in that.
Yeah, there you go. All right, next question.
The last one for today. Mike Burns is back again. Did anybody watch Governor Newsome's live address yesterday? From a production point of view, it was kind of an audio-video sync dumpster fire.
It's the state of California. Sorry. So anyway, what I mean by that is the state of California is pretty good at making bad video and audio. I don't quite understand, why that's so hard, but every address that I can't watch the addresses anymore. I watch the news because the addresses that the state, local levels do are so bad. They make me so upset that I can't watch them anymore.
Yeah.
So it has the exact opposite effect on me than hey, we're going to tell everyone everything. I'm like, I'll wait for the press release because I can't watch the video.
Yeah, no, Alex, it wasn't like frames, it was seconds.
Oh no, I know. It's like that all the time. Welcome to California in their AV. So it's not that hard to do well. They just don't put any effort into it. So anyway, so the timing is good. I don't have anything to say other than it's horrible and I don't watch it anymore. So I don't see it because I can't watch it. It hurts my eyes and my ears. We are now moving on to Zoom on time. I'll be here for the first little bit of time, and then I have to bump off to a show again. We're moving to Zoom. There's so many things that are changing right now. Zoom is after it got through the security issues and the other things that they were focused on, scaling and stability, Zoom just started adding features. And so there's two things that are happening. One is that Zoom's adding a lot of features that are great. Number two is that a lot of us are getting pretty good at doing some crazy things inside of Zoom. So I think that it's the skill sets are improving inside of this group specifically, but in general, and I think a lot of people are doing things that are pretty aggressive inside of the platform. And so I thought that it would be useful for us to have a a Friday where we talk about what those are and how we're using Zoom. And Andy, who's in the call here, and Andy, is it Carluccio? Is that right?
Yes, Carluccio. Yes.
Carluccio. Okay. Oh God, first time. Anyway, pretty proud of myself there. Andy writes Zoom OSC. And is it OSC Zoom or Zoom OSC?
Zoom OSC.
Zoom OSC. Next week, we're going to do a whole thing about Zoom OSC, because after Andy got here early and after us all talking about it, I decided we'll do a whole other. So we're not going to talk about that as much. We'll talk about it a little bit. That's like remote, basically lets you build much more complex interactions with Zoom. But we're going to talk about that for a whole hour next Friday. But this Friday, we're just going to talk about how we're using Zoom, answer questions of people trying to solve problems in Zoom, and probably touch on a couple different ways of handling it. In about 45 seconds, I'll explain. What I want to do is there's a couple of us that I know that a couple of us are doing some pretty aggressive things. So I was going to bounce around a little bit and talk about how we use them. And then other people can raise your hand if you want to talk about how you're doing it. I'm going to jump to Grant and Chris Fenwick. They're just the two that I've talked the most about this, to just talk about how they approach it. And this will just be for the first 5 minutes or so. And then after that, we'll get into any other questions. And if anybody else is hearing something new or has something else they want to add, please do raise your hand. It's just that those are the ones that I know of.
Hey, Alex, can I ask for just a second how you want me to handle the 9 o'clock hour when we get to there? Do you want me to try to push things along when you're gone to get done by
at 9 o'clock? I don't see the Zoom. I don't see Zoom. Like, I don't see the webinar. I just see the meeting when I open it. So if you're not done at 9, you will be.
Okay. so that's what I experienced yesterday.
Yeah, because I don't see it. All I do is I open up the interface, I hit go, I wait for the first person that is kind of part of the old crew to show up and turn on their video. So yesterday was TJ, so I was like, TJ's host, you're it, and then I disappeared. so I'm in, because I'm in production, my load in time is technically that time. So
okay, anyway. So we'll try to move as quickly. We got 20 questions already for this.
You can do whatever you want. It just ends at 9. So anyway, okay, I somehow knocked my mic out. Anyway, so the way that we're doing most of our events, and I think I've stated it before, I'll just say it really quickly, and then we can answer questions related to that, is we do point-to-point for everybody. So we use Zoom rooms for each person, and typically we then feed those back into a constellation, which we then do cross, we can do picture-in-pictures, and we can do a lot of other, bits and pieces to it. When we're doing smaller, just Zoom-only events, we're using MimoLive for those. So we use MimoLive to run the events and run all the videos and everything else that we're pushing into it. When we do the larger events, we're still using the constellation with we use MV16s to do returns. So every person that enters gets to see one of these MVs as a return. We can send back whatever we want to them to have them see it. And it can be a 4-up or 9-up or 16-up, depending on what they're getting back. But everybody's in a point-to-point. That allows us to add comms. So you could use Unity. We use ClearCom to do returns back to everyone. We do all the video mix minuses inside of a Yamaha, either Q01 or CL5. And that's kind of the heavy iron way to kind of approach that process, where we just kind of throw hardware at things. But what it allows us to do is build very complex events that we couldn't build any other way. And so we used to use a lot of screen sharing, but now that we have a 1080p version of webinar, we'll probably end up doing more just pure video shots. Grant, go ahead. And how do you approach these?
Yeah, so it was really back in February that I had a client say, hey, we need to do these all these meetings that we have around Australia. We need to do them. We need to do them online somehow. And we just started live streaming. But very quickly they said, well, they're actually workshops and we really need more interaction. And so very quickly I got a little site going that could manage Zoom with the API, so that we could control the name of the person, so they're registered in Zoom, and then we can track really what's their activity. So for education purposes, we know when they've joined and when they've left, and that all tells our system automatically. So I was just a couple of steps ahead, and then I met Blue through office hours, Blue Melnick, and he was doing this amazing, mind-blowing thing of having 1,000 people in 6 meetings or something and joining them all together with hardware. Fast forward to today, So I guess the point was I started chatting with Blue saying, hey, I've been messing around with the API. This could really work with what you're doing. So we're now partnered on software that is running right now. And so I'm a little bit divided, but I really wanted to chat here with you guys because it's because of office hours that I'm doing this stuff. So today, right at this moment, we've just started 2 meetings. One out of Brazil with 5,000 people, 10,000 people in that one, in 35 different Zoom meetings. And then at the same time, another meeting with 5,000 people across 85 meetings. So right now, our system has about 130 meetings running. So they're different accounts. They're all these Zoom meetings. And we have a series of on-site meetings running on machines in the studios. And then one F Jeff is running a whole bunch of, he's got about 50 AWS instances that are running Zoom in there. And so they're all tied back to this one system. And that was, the genesis was, I think, version 4 now. Version 1 was me coding a whole bunch of stuff to generate all of these meetings and get them talking to each other and have everyone registered and controlling all the security of all of that. So that's all that that US stuff and overseas. And then I still do Australia stuff, and that's where I do those breakout room things. And there's all these education programs that I run here in Australia, and we use Zoom in a really cool way with breakout rooms for stages and green rooms and all of that stuff. So I really doubled down on Zoom.
Well, and the thing that I want to underline is that what we see a little bit, what Grant really is showing here is the scalability of these events. And it isn't about virtual backgrounds, and it isn't about weird little, it's about connecting a bunch of people and getting them all, into a unified conversation and stretching this out. And these are global events that are happening. And you can't, at the rate that we're growing and the rate that Grant and Blue are growing and other people are doing this, they're not going to be able to fit these events back into a physical location, because they're including so many more people. That's the thing that we keep on seeing over and over and over again, is when you just embrace an online experience and you really figure out how to scale into that, you end up with building these events that include a lot more people. And the ROI is there. Daria was talking about yesterday of ROI for concerts and ROI for meetings and impact. If you're a brand, all of these things are getting more and more intense. And so that's why, and I don't think, the reason we're spending an hour on Zoom and we're going to spend another hour on Zoom next Friday is because I'm pretty good at calculating trajectories, and I don't think anyone's going to catch up. We're kind of going to keep focusing on it because I'm watching how everybody's doing. And I get that a lot of people are spending a lot of money, but I've worked in a lot of big corporations, and I don't think anyone's going to catch up to Zoom. And so we just keep on wanting to figure out how do we all learn how to use it. We can play with the other platforms, but I don't think the other ones are going to keep up with what's going on. And it just has to do with the right DNA, the right code base, the right, just where they came from and what you have to be in the right place at the right time. And I don't think the other companies were. And so I think that we want to keep on looking at that. But what you're seeing with Grant is a scalability. The ones that are tens of thousands are going to be hundreds of thousands in the next 3 months. That's my guess. There's going to be hundreds of thousands of people in an event that would have shut down San Francisco. And it's like, we just push a button. They all appear. It won't be a little bit, but and that's it's entirely, that's what's possible. Go ahead, Chris Fenwick.
Yeah, I'm glad you let Grant go first, because I wouldn't want to steal any of his thunder.
We're expecting big things from you, Chris.
I didn't know you were going to call on me. I was like, what? Who? Who's this
here's the thing is that here's the Chris. The thing that we've talked about with what you're doing is a lot of the record. So I want people to think about I'm doing. So what I do is these kind of bespoke, all hardware, barely, kind of uses Zoom as an ingest point. Grant is taking full advantage of, Zoom in the cloud and building it out and taking full advantage of how it works. But what I think is interesting about what you're doing is high-end records that are being done from people's houses. That is another angle of how Zoom is used.
I think the key thing to take away or to think about when it comes to Zoom as a platform is that it is an open canvas. I mean, you can do so many different things with it. And I think that for us, the thing that's been really important is to very much work on the, this is a loaded word. I won't use that word. I was going to say political side of it, not political, but the human engineering part. When COVID happened, we had to talk our biggest clients into using Zoom because they were like, oh no, we have WebEx. It's the same thing. I was like, no, it's not the same thing. It's oh my God, it's not the same thing. and they were literally like, what's the same thing? So, so we really had to like walk them through, show them the advantages, and then reveal to them kind of the, Bill mentioned the Apple term, progressive disclosure. You know, I'm not going to throw it all at you at once, but I'm going to reveal what we can do. And I just did I just reconnected with a producer I hadn't worked with in several years. And we did some Zoom recordings the other day. And at the end of it, she was like, oh my God, there's so much I have to learn. And I said, yeah, there's a lot to learn. And as you begin to reveal it, people start to see the power of it. And I'll say that the difference, and I think I mentioned this yesterday on the show, that the difference between a pro and somebody else is how well do you know that back end? You know, you have to, like, that should be nighttime reading, just scrolling through the back end and learning all the things that you can do.
And for me, it's not just what I talk to clients about a lot, and we're about to jump into everyone's questions here. So if you have questions, throw them in there. Is how important. I still think the future is, it's great that we're doing these big events. I still think the future is lots of small events. So obviously I do a lot of small events with all of you. You know, we do this every day. But the, you know, and most people can't handle that, but weekly events, monthly events. And part of it is you learning. We've learned a ton about how we do this. So how we do what we do here has evolved to where we are, and we're growing. What you're seeing possible, I think, in office hours is, you know, I was talking to someone about this the other day that you know, we represent what if you did a monthly meeting 20 years later, this is what it would look like, you know, because we're running at 30 times the speed of a monthly meeting. Then we're running at 7 times the speed. This would be 3 to 5 years into this if you were doing a weekly meeting. So, you know, this is what you would evolve to. You know, we're kind of out there because we're doing it every day. And we're learning how to do it. I'm constantly learning how to do this stuff, you know, and how do we, the better way to run it. How do we run meetings and breakout rooms and all those other things? How do I interact with you? How do I send out updates? How do I do all those other things? But more importantly, all of you are learning how to interact with Zoom, how to interact with the online tools, how to interact with those. And so as a community, we all learn the language that's required. And the hard part is people build one event per quarter or one event per month, and it's a big deal. And if anything goes wrong, it's going to be a problem, and nobody knows what they're doing. And there's no flattening the curve, and there's no, you know, like there's only a handful of people that have to, you know, pick it up at a time. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
The one thing that when I do my events with different people is what I try to do is make it look a lot less like a Zoom call, because you know, a lot of people are sitting there going, oh, you're using Zoom, you're using Zoom. So what I end up doing is, when I do a lot of recording, is I find that making the framing of the person's head so you can cut off the corners, so they don't see the name, they don't see that little annoying little signal thing that doesn't work anyway in the corner, and making it go from there. One other thing I want to show you really quick before you go, very important, and that is the 1080p thing. So I wanted to show you.
Oops.
And we lost you.
The wonders of online community. I always think about the visual of that. If they were on stage, someone just freezes and just kind of vibrates, and then we're like, okay, now we're going to move on. All right, Sky, go ahead.
255 days today.
Yep. All right, let's jump into the questions.
Mike Burns has the most upvoted question in the panel today. From Spokane, I want to interview a guest via Zoom. What's the best way?
Mickey.
What's the best way to record 2 mono audio tracks, just myself and one guest, using an iMac? Can this be done in Audio Hijack? Can I split the audio track that Zoom supplies? Inquiring minds want to know.
Go ahead, Ken, and then Chris.
Yes, Audio Hijack absolutely will do that. In fact, if you look at the sources and choose application, and then from application choose Zoom, it defaults to recording your voice on the left channel and everybody else's summed voice on the right channel.
Go ahead, Chris Fenwick. And then
What I
Sky
was
Rowe.
going to say is if you bother to hit the button, the record button at the bottom of your screen and choose a local recording, there's also some extra clicks you have to do. Again, going back to you have to understand the back end. You can record each voice in a meeting as a separate audio stem.
All right. So, Chris, so how do you do that, though? Is that something in preferences, or does it do it by default?
Record preferences.
There's a couple of things, yes, in record. You may not, Grant will know. You may not actually have to go to the web, but I know you definitely have to turn on. Okay, there's a handful of stuff. I think the biggest thing is knowing what it's called, so you can search for it. But it's separate audio tracks. It can be done. I will say, one annoying feature is that to save data, Zoom only starts recording each person when they first talk. So they won't line up at the front end. They'll line up at the tail end. And one way around that I've done is I've just said, hey, everybody, can everybody just applaud for a second? And so they're all recording at the top, and then I hit the record button.
That's good. That's good. Sky, then Mickey.
Yes, second that. Been doing it for about 3 months, and it works great. And you can, if you want, you have a master track that's mixed that you could, if you wanted to sync it to that, that's the other way of doing it.
That's great. Mickey?
Yeah, just to support what the Fenwick was saying, Chris Fenwick was saying, on Zoom, it's in the local Zoom app settings. It's called record a separate audio file for each participant.
Yeah, great. Next question.
But it's only the local record, the
Moving
Zoom
on.
local record.
Laura Thompson of Beaumont, Texas, frequently on our education panel, says, what are some best practices when dealing with things such as FERPA and HIPAA? And those are the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act and Healthcare Information Privacy Portability Act, for those of you who are not into acronyms.
These are the privacy issues. I mean, how do you deal with privacy issues inside of
Protected
Zoom?
information during a Zoom meeting using breakout rooms. She wants to address all that.
I don't know if we are very good at that. I mean, I don't.
It's
I
important
personally
to
don't
know about it, just to know that these things are
It's
very
there.
important.
I will argue that truly following those guidelines is impossible in video conferencing unless you are in a military or intelligence location. You know, like, and even then it would be, because they are more tight. But the but outside of that, people have this thing like it's HIPAA compliant or it's and stuff like that. It's not really. It's HIPAA compliant for people who don't understand technology. But outside of that, there's no way to protect that kind of information over top of this process, in my opinion. In a truly private way, there's always someone can screen capture. There's always some way to route it out. There's always some, there's just. Now, I do believe Zoom can be very secure in the sense that you can tie it down. I mean, we generally can tie it down more than our clients are willing to allow us to, with passwords and with waiting rooms and with security and everything else. They're the ones that usually pull back on the security, not us. And so it can be very secure. Whether it's truly HIPAA compliant, I don't know for sure. Go ahead, Grant.
I was just going to add the same sort of things, but Zoom is adding full end-to-end encryption. But what it does is it turns off a bunch of all the cool features that we want. You can't do cloud recording. You can't do breakout rooms. You can't do, there's all these things you can't do because it bypasses their servers and it's, has to go direct. But even then, exactly, you can still have it encrypted along the way and then have someone recording it at the other end. And so, I think the data protection, one of the things we do is when we register everybody, we use bogus emails. One of the reasons for that is that we don't want Zoom to send emails out to everyone accidentally. And we've got all that turned off, but you just don't want 10,000 people getting an email from Zoom about something that changed in the setting or something. But it also means that that they are anonymous in that sense, and it's just their name, the less personal data that you're providing other third-party services, I think the better.
In the Makana chat, A. Mitchells and Andy Dolph both say there is HIPAA-compliant versions or modes for Zoom that if that's a critical thing for you, you should probably look into.
Yeah. Next question.
Moving along, we are going to Jonas Dattel of Reutlingen. Is there a Zoom as a service web service that hosts Zoom machines? I can then get a multi-view or control of things.
I don't know of any Zoom as a service other than a handful of us that do it. You can call Grant. Grant will set you up. But I don't. George, go ahead.
This is just a plug. Call Tucker. He could get you a multi-view.
There you go. And Unity. Next question.
Moving along, James from Dublin says, can the panel talk about Zoom 1080p and 720p, how to get it, how it affects the image for the grid, pinned, and or spotlight views?
It's kind of a mystery to how you get it. We have 1080p here. I attacked it from like 8 different angles. I don't know which one was the, I don't know who the parent is. Anyway, the 1080p is something that for webinars, if you get a business account and you pay for 10 of them, and then you send out an email and say, I need 1080p, generally they'll set that up for you. One point to point, you'll get 1080p. I think all the rooms do 1080p all the time. For that, the rooms will always do 1080p. And then the big thing is whether webinar attendees get 1080p, and that's been the one that's been the hardest to get. You just have to know somebody or be somebody that needs that. Go ahead, Jeffrey. You're silent, Jeffrey. No audio. But the pinning, you're not going to get the same resolution. Zoom is very efficient about that. So you're not going to get that high resolution until someone spotlights it. And then I'll be curious to see whether we're streaming in 1080p to YouTube, because now it sounds like we're not. So we're still 720p to YouTube, which is fine. So now officially today, as of today, the webinar is higher resolution than YouTube, which hasn't been the case for a couple months. Go ahead, Jeffrey, you want to try again?
Okay, let's try that. Okay, now you can hear me. So before my Zoom crashed, I was going to show you the statistics on both of these. In order for it to do it, Mickey, I need you to pin like Alex or something like that. And for that, so then we go here. And as you can see, this is in the panelist view right here. You can still see me, right?
We see your image. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so you see it as 1920 by 1080, and now it's doing a weird inception thing. So I'm going to flip back here. So as you can see, it can be done. The one thing that I did notice is it was doing, especially on the panelist view, it was flipping back and forth between 720, 1920, 1600 by 900 and stuff like that, which might make it difficult for any type of recording or go from there. And then one more thing, I did watch the live stream. It was set 720. It might bump up afterwards, but we'll see what happens.
I doubt it.
Yeah,
and that's fine.
I do too.
I think that all of this stuff is temporary. I think we have to know that Zoom grew at 10x in 1 month and then has been cleaning up the mess that created for a long time. I think that my expectation is that all these resolutions a year from now will all be there. Maybe you only get 1080p if you're paying and you don't get it for free, but I think that we'll be back to a regular resolution. So this is all the things we're talking about with resolution are temporary until the infrastructure catches up with the demand. I think that's the main thing that's happening now. Go ahead, Courtney.
I and several other panelists have noticed that the sync is off now that we're in 1080p. I was wondering if that's a buffering issue with resolution. Yeah,
something we've noticed. Yeah, with 1080p delivery, it takes a little bit of more work for it to do it. It's also, the other thing is that it's more sensitive. So because it's low latency, there's no room for error. And now we're asking it to do a lot more. So you'll notice that there are more frame drops, more clicks, a lot of other things that happen. I believe that that's worth it. But that's why there's a radio box in the webinar when you have 1080p or when you're doing these other things, allow 1080p. There are reasons to not use it at times if people aren't going to have a very good connection, because the 1080p is much less forgiving. It's something we noticed when we started using rooms. It's much less forgiving on the far end than the lower resolution. So you have a limited amount of bandwidth to work with. Go ahead, Chris.
Do you ever find that when you're doing point-to-points that you actually ask people to turn it off because they don't have the bandwidth to get out at 1080?
No, we just muscle through it, because I still rather have a sharper image. Like people are kind of used to frames dropping. But it does create interesting edits afterwards for syncing audio. Like to pull it all back together. Anyway, I have to jump. I have to break this all down and get in my car and go and do a shoot. So I'm going to let you guys run with it. Thanks, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye, Alex. Have a good day. Okay, we've got 20.
9 o'clock. Remember, 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock, we're dead.
Yep.
Okay, we'll go off the cliff. We have 24, 25, 26, 27 questions, guys. So we're going to keep this to a couple of quick comments as we move through. Jonas Tattel is in first with, has someone used the on-prem solutions from Zooms? In Germany, the church implemented it to use Zoom within their privacy laws. So I guess this is having Zoom co-locate out to where you are and put in a dedicated line so that you're in control of it totally. Anybody use that? I'm not seeing anybody. Okay. The answer is no, and we're moving to the next question. Sorry, Jonas. James Babbitt of San Diego here. Hi, Alex. The video quality for attendees looks great. Please discuss the change. Is it just webinars, or would it work for regular Zoom meetings with a pro account? Does anybody know what Alex did in terms of the upgrade and how it works? Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, it's mostly the traditional way of doing it is that you buy the business account. However, they don't let you just buy a business account. A business account is $20 a month as opposed to $15 a month. They actually say that you have to get 10 of them. I have heard rumors that not everybody does that. But if you buy 10 of them, you have the potential of getting more resolution, but then you have to ask for the more resolution. And they may ask you why you think you need the resolution. And when I did it, I wrote a letter and I said, I've been recording, very high profile people, and I would like to make them look better, and then in turn make Zoom look better. And they apparently thought that that was a nice pitch, and they said, okay, fine, we're going to give you 720p. And then I wrote a few more letters, and I said, really? Because I'd really like to have that 1080p. And eventually they gave it to me. Then once they give it to you, you have to go figure out how to go turn it all on. And it's not insignificant in the back end. Like you might have it, but if you don't turn it on, you're not going to get it. So it's daunting, and I got a lot of help from very smart people here in office hours.
It reminds me of when I was a kid and we had irrigation for watering our lawns. You had to apply for the amount of water you wanted to get, and there was a limited supply of water. And if you didn't have a good reason, they wouldn't open up the sluices and let you have water for your big lot, or it would, a bigger pipe. And that we're here with the information age doing exactly the same thing. All right, moving along, because I don't see any other hands up on that one, to Andy Dolphs from Durham, New Hampshire. Do people use the built-in streaming on the ATEM Mini Pro versus streaming via computer or dedicated hardware encoder? And if so, why or why not? Where are our ATEM Mini people here in the panel? Jeff Francis, go ahead.
Yeah, I've streamed from the ATEM Mini Pro. It worked great. And I also do a lot of streaming from hardware encoders. I get frightened when I'm streaming with a software encoder and my fans go crazy, and I'm worried about my computer dying because I'm on a 2016 MacBook Pro, and so I prefer hardware in that.
Okay, and I'm assuming Hasmick was scratching his head, not raising his hand, so I'm going to... Okay, good. George Kennedy, go ahead.
So real quick, ATEM Mini is great, but I mean, I have 4 KiloView encoders at home here, and it does SRT, RTMP. I mean, the fear is software is going to go down, and you don't want to have to try to explain to a client why the stream went down.
That's a bad thing. Grant, go ahead.
Exhibit A. I've got like a 2-second delay right now on my ATEM.
It's ugly.
And, yeah. And so and so yes, it works awesome when it works awesome, but yeah, this
way
just
out of
seems to
syncs
happen.
and dropping frames like a bad juggler.
Yeah, and then it'll come back and it'll be fine.
Interesting.
And it's not overheating or anything. It's not hot. It just seems to do this from time to time. So
okay,
there's no one perfect solution.
Jeff, last thought before we move on.
Grant, is your ATEM connected directly USB-C, or is it connected through a hub?
I'm sorry, that was Jeff Francis. Go ahead, Jeff Powers.
So yeah, I do that when I am connected to my ATEM Mini, but I use the ISO to do the streaming or do the recording of the individual stems, and then I use the Ethernet as opposed to using the USB-C solution. I feel that using the USB-C solution to do any type of post streaming or anything like that has caused more problems than if you go straight through the Cat5 cable.
Okay, moving on to Chris Russo, who is from Red Hook and asks, does anyone on the panel have any experience virtualizing Zoom rooms, either on the local server as a VM or by using a cloud-based service such as AWS? Zoom rooms. Well, he said Zoom rooms. So anybody have experience with getting into that bit of arcane, trying to make one thing work like another? I'm not seeing it. Sky, you're tentatively, and then
Well, I am tentatively because I'm experimenting and working with StreamYard, and I've been interchanging the two of those systems in doing screen shares in both systems because I don't think that's really answering your question. But as far as homogenizing how they can work together, you can stream within a stream. It's kind of weird.
Grant had some thoughts. Oh, Grant now is gone. Did you reset everything so you wouldn't be out of sync, right?
I just tried, but it's no different. So yes, 1F Jeff is the genius at this. As I said, it's happening right now. We've got about 50 meetings running in EC2 instances in AWS, and so they are all running. And then there's NDI that there's some NDI. The input for all of those is NDI. And then we could have NDI coming back, and we're playing a little bit with that, but that's not what we need in this instance. Now, I'm guessing that you don't mean Zoom rooms as in the conference software in what you're talking about there. But if you are talking about that, we're having no end of trouble trying to get a Zoom room running in the cloud. So it just will not start the process. So we've tried all sorts of different things with graphics, NVIDIA enabled instances and all sorts of different things. And so my last little try now is the Mac, which there should be no reason why it won't work because it's dedicated hardware, but it's also $1 an hour, over $1 an hour, and a 24-hour commitment, and so it's not really a cheap solution, but that's specifically if you're trying to use Zoom rooms, but meetings seems to run fine.
Also sounds like that if you're a regular watcher of Office Hours, keep your eyes open and hope that Jeff Keithley, who is 1F Jeff, as we lovingly refer to him, and if he's here, maybe ask your question again. So moving on, Brian Bavado, of Detroit, Michigan says, I'm curious as to everyone's best practice, highest resolution for doing ISOs of each presenter in Zoom, such as a dedicated meeting, breakout room, or Zoom room. Of course, creating mix minuses and return feeds as needed. Who's doing a lot of multi-ISO Zoom? And George Kennedy is going to raise his hand. Good, George.
Well, I'm doing a lot of ISOs, but for my use case, resolution is not necessarily important. 640 is great because what we're doing is recording the ISOs, bringing them back into our editor, do our 4-up box or whatever the case may be, and we're pushing them back out to our live stream a few days later. So it depends on which your end edit is going to be.
Yeah, it's interesting. Everybody's gotten these capabilities. We also want it to work like a dedicated camera system with feeds to recorders. That's asking it to do an awful lot. Grant?
Yeah, so I've done it with multiple meetings, so multiple dedicated machines that are connected to the meeting, and then pinning one of the speakers or the presenters, and then doing a local record. And essentially whatever you can get, if you can do a full screen and if the meeting enables 1080 and your hardware will handle 1080, then it will record locally at 1080 as well. It seems to just take whatever that is on your screen, and if it's pinned, it's going to record that. And so I've done that successfully with 4 or 5 different machines, and just using that the local recording. The cloud recording is awesome as well, and you can separate out only to a point. You can have active speaker, gallery, and screen share as 3 separate files that are completely in sync. And so that's very handy, and that'll be at maximum resolution.
It's crazy. Every time I look over, we're going to the next question. There's still 22 questions in the queue behind the ones we're currently dealing with. So this is a hugely important subject. If using a Facebook portal 8-inch or 10-inch to bump Zoom sessions to 720p, does it have to start the meeting? Does it have to be logged into a Zoom account? When does it fail? And Chris is shaking his head. So you've got a thought on that.
Yeah, I mean, Guy is the master of this. He's the one who taught us all that this existed. I literally have a portal right out of camera reach here, and when I needed it, it was you just dial in the ID number and the password. It pops in. I think others will tell you here that it only has to be in the meeting for, what is it, like 20 or 30 seconds. You can even leave the meeting and it will still maintain a resolution of 720p. It is far and away the cheapest and easiest way to get higher resolution out of Zoom.
There you go. Benjamin Antiput is up next from San Carlos. Could you detail the signal chain for using Zoom with MimoLive, vMix, or OBS? Note specifically, how might you suggest bringing in ISO feeds? Maybe Andy can share a bit about the Zoom NDI.
Well, I can say, the long-term play that we're going to have a beta program for shortly is NDI ISO feeds coming out of Zoom through a custom app that we're working on. It's not available today, so I think there's still value in discussing alternate solutions in the meantime while we still get that out the door. One of the things that I do when I need it right now is I use Zoom OSC's gallery tracking information, and I use that to inform my other programs about what is happening in Zoom so that it can follow around and react as needed.
Nice. Okay. Next question, I believe, so I'm not seeing any other hands. We're moving to Michael Fisk of Spokane Valley. I need a Zoomologist. How do I enter the room with my cam on?
Back-end adjustments.
So there's a menu somewhere buried in the Zoom settings that lets you persistently put it on. And is that a sticky setting? Once you set it, do you have to do it every time you come back, or does it stay there? Jeffrey Powers?
Yeah, it'll stay on every time unless the host says that you cannot have your cameras on. Then it'll be off.
So the host controls basically how the meeting sees new attendees. Okay, makes sense. So John has your hand raised. John Idelson.
Yeah, under settings, there's a box under my videos that says turn off my video when joining a meeting, and you can uncheck that.
Simple as that. Okay, moving on to Jonas Dotel again. Zoom OSC. Can Zoom OSC sort my gallery view so that it stays when it gets switched? We've all run into the dancing gallery pycons.
Yeah, and it's so Zoom OSC doesn't actually change the view. What it does is it tells you how the view is changing so that your software can react to it. As you know, the way that Zoom organizes the gallery view can sometimes be random. Most of the time, it's based on order that video came on into the gallery. There's a lot of exceptions. The pinned person, whether it's your video in the gallery view. So what we did is we sat down and calculated all of these different possibilities, and we burned them into our program in an algorithm that will now spit out to you the order of the gallery view with the IDs of each participant. That way, the software that you're running to capture Zoom can dynamically crop and reorganize gallery views to make your own basically ISO feeds that you can then recompose into another view. We have people who take multiple gallery views and compose them together to merge calls. We have all sorts of stuff, and we've automated some of it with shaders and GLSL and all that kind of stuff. But so while Zoom OSC doesn't reorganize the gallery view that you're capturing, it tells you this additional data so that you can work with that view and get it working.
Andy, you're going to tell me there's really such thing as a unicorn next, right? Really? Really?
That sounds kind of useful for a lot of
Wow.
people. Okay, moving on. We have a lot to get through. Hey, we're down to 17 over in the other group, so that's good. Keenan Campbell of Princeton, Illinois says, have a Zoom Pro meeting account. Can someone talk about what accounts are best and for what applications? So how much do you need to spend every month to get what you're looking for? Anybody want to talk through all the various Zoom levels? Sky, you raised your hand.
I will be quick. It's again, work backwards from your need. I start with the base and then add as you grow. So I have the base, and that's all I need.
So sometimes don't get ahead of your skis in terms of getting a bigger count than you need, maybe. Okay,
unless you workshop it and go sell it, if that's what you think you need to do.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on, Todd Harder of West Palm Beach, Florida. I'll be hosting a Zoom meeting where the presenter wants 2 large 80-inch screens just off camera so he can see the gallery as large as possible. Before I spend $3,000 on TVs, I wanted to know if the best way to do this is to resize the Zoom interface to span both screens. I wonder if he's thought about a projector, but regardless, does anybody else have any ideas for how to get the gallery, I guess, essentially bigger without just upsizing the screen that you're viewing it on? Sky?
Do you need an 80? I mean, if you an 80-inch screen, there's lots of Black Friday sales and Cyber Mondays. You could probably get an 80-inch for a lot less than that. I don't know. I'm not into that market, but I like the projector idea.
Mickey?
Yeah, I believe on some graphics cards, at least on Windows, you can link together a bunch of screens. I don't know exactly what the terminology is, but on the specific like driver settings for graphics cards, you can have essentially 2 monitors act like one, so you can stretch that whole gallery view across 2 monitors.
I know there's a lot of presentation software that allows that because they do matrices of screen groupings. George Kennedy, then Jeffrey Powers, real quick.
Just a reminder that rental companies, especially Rentex, will rent you up to 90s, and you could also get computers to do whatever you want to do. So if you're trying to build in these big projects, you could definitely just go ahead and put together a budget and rent and pass it on to your client.
That's interesting. Yeah, get a smaller screen, set it all up so it's all working right. Then you just replace the screen with the big rental for day of game, and everything's all pre-set up. Guy?
Yeah, there's a lot of people who want these large screens more for the personal feel. So there's something to it about having the gallery view that big, and you can use something like OBS to then do almost what a SuperSource would do on a big ATEM and bring in that one person larger across so that the presenter really feels like they're talking to them. So when you're there, yeah, and you're talking virtually to somebody and they're big, it makes it different. So I'd say go get the 280-inch screens if it's in the budget and fly with it, because it drives the conversation, especially over days. You're going to amortize this cost back out because it's gonna feel like you can see. Part of communication is seeing people's facial gestures. So being able to see it large makes a big difference.
So I'd recommend getting a big Christie light cannon type thing and, spend $150,000. What the heck? You'll get the biggest, brightest, prettiest gallery you've ever seen in your life. Moving along to Brett Dickus of Kansas City, Missouri. Is there a way to have the Zoom room audio join or auto answer without interaction on the controller? Has anybody tried to do this? Guy down there. Hi.
Yeah, I'm down there. See, I'm in that top left corner on my screen.
In the bottom row for me. I have to. That's why it took me a minute to get down to you. I had to scan all the hands.
Gotcha. Yeah, the Zoom room, it's a setting where you can say auto answer, and that is one of the coolest features about a Zoom room, as opposed to just having a Zoom client on a machine, is that you can have it auto answer. And so like I've had mine set up with the WLM meters, or if I want to bring meters into a meeting, or if I want to bring my fish tank into this meeting, I just turn on the video. You guys see my fish tank? Where's my fish tank at?
We always want to see your fish tank.
There it is.
There we go.
There's the fish tank. Hey, Mickey, you want to pin the fish tank? Actually, you might see a reflection of the kids. But yeah, that's a Zoom room downstairs, and I have it on auto answer, and I've let friends use it to bump up the resolution of meetings before the portal came out. So handy to have.
Answering the important questions. Do your fish have names? Should we address them personally?
I don't know. They're not mine. They're the family fish. I don't know. I don't really talk to them.
Okay. I hear that. Let's
Talk
keep
to
moving
the
along.
family or the fish.
We got 14 questions and just 15 minutes, so we're going to keep moving quickly through these. Michael Fisk of Spokane Valley, any tricks to eliminate the monitor glare off eyeglasses? Yeah, we've talked about that before. You can put something under the temples so that the angle of incidence and the angle of reflection. You can also go to an optometrist and get them to put an anti-reflective coating if you can find one in a mall that's still open during the middle of COVID or something else. There's a couple of ways to do that. Anybody else have any other tricks for shooting with people with glasses? Those are kind of the standard too, I would think. James Babbitt of San Diego says, what settings would work best to improve audio quality from those joining a Zoom meeting from home? If they use an iPad, it seems there is no setting in the Zoom app to turn the original sound on or off. Is that true? Does anybody consume Zoom often on an iPad or one of the iDevices? And is the interface different that way? Anybody have any idea? I'm seeing no hands go up, so nobody here is probably using iOS that much. Mickey, you got an idea?
Yeah. On iOS, yeah, there are no settings, but you can improve things with hardware. You can get the simple interface that's designed for mobile devices and pair that with a decent microphone.
There you go. Jeffrey Powers and then Jeff Francis.
The other thing is room control. If it's a bouncy room, put up blankets, put up clothing, put up anything that can kill the sound. And of course, getting closer to the device is always a good help right there. Maybe even putting something behind the device, like for instance, if I'm using the portal for audio, I know that the two microphones are up on top, and that if I put something behind that, at least that'll try and kill any sound that's going from a different direction.
You said bouncy room. I heard bouncy house, and I thought that would be a terrible place to do a Zoom from. A bouncy house? No.
That might be a perfect place to.
Jeff Francis.
Yeah, with the iPad, just if you put some wired earbuds with the inline microphone that's along the wire, that gets it closer to their mouth. So that's a really simple way to get the mic close to them, get them on headphones. So that's going to improve Zoom audio immensely.
And the last but not least, Mike Burns, who used to work at the Apple Store. Mike?
Yeah, so I noticed yesterday in B&H, the new Red Scarlet actually has an interface that takes USB-C. So if you have an iPad Air or an iPad Pro, you could actually send any XLR microphone into it.
Oh, that'd be useful. All right. Moving on to Jonas Dattel of Reutlingen again. Is the muting of audio done locally? I have the impression that sometimes the last word gets lost when muting directly. I'm sitting here using a hardware mute control and leaving my Zoom thing open all the time because I'm constantly having to come back on for the questions. But how does anybody else see the muting function react for them? Jeff Francis?
It's done locally, and it can also be done remotely if you allow that feature in Zoom. And I think it's just a habit that we need to all develop, that we unmute and we wait a beat and then begin speaking. And then when we finish speaking, we wait a beat and then we mute.
That's sensible. You know, I know when everybody hears the Top Gun type thing where everybody with one of those comm systems from a jet fighter always kind of starts with ground control. And somebody once told me that the was to establish the carrier wave that takes a second. And I think that pausing a minute, it might be really useful. Mickey and then Jeff. Jeffrey?
Yeah, one thing that I noticed with a bunch of people that are running delays on their audio to match up sync is that they have to keep in mind that technically the audio coming from the microphone will show up in the Zoom app however long the sync is later. So if their delay is 200 milliseconds, Zoom will only hear that sound 200 milliseconds later. So if you mute right away after you speak, then you'll be cutting off your last syllable.
I've probably done that a bunch of times myself. Jeff Powers.
Yeah, and that was same thing, software switching. If you're doing that, there might be a small delay going in, whether you go through virtual or go through NDI. Like for instance, I find that I'm about 300-400 milliseconds behind sometimes in talking, so that you definitely want to wait a second before you finish speaking. The other thing is the space bar. That seems to be the big Zoom etiquette right there, is when you're done speaking, people are really quick to let go of that space bar, and that'll definitely cut out their voices as they go.
Yeah, I find that, listening back sometimes when I'm on, I try to listen back to a show and I am surprised at how much I think I'm doing is affecting things that I didn't realize it was doing. So getting a feedback loop somehow can help, I think. Moving on, James in Dublin says, often the image from my camera looks washed out compared to the image I see in my camera software. In this case, a Logitech Brio. Is this common and can it be fixed? The Pycons in my gallery view always look a little washed out compared to what I see as the signal when I watch back on Zoom. So I'm wondering if it has something to do with Zoom compressing down a bigger, more colorful signal into a smaller Pycon. That might be part of it. Does anybody else have any ideas as to why things might look washed out? No? So I guess that's as close as I can come. George Kennedy from Washington, D.C. on the panel. Grant, how are you mixing a Zoom panel of 4 in vMix? Do I need to call on you?
I'm now, yeah, I've done it a few different ways now. I've actually, probably 6 months ago, I made a little video. It was done on the TriCaster, but it was how I was doing that. And it was using gallery view and active speaker. And now I'm just using the Zoom room, and I have a gallery view that's really nice and clean, and the active speaker. And I just find even with that slight delay when the active speaker changes, we just hang on the gallery view for a little bit and then we switch over to active speaker, and that works completely fine. And then we come back to the gallery view of the 4. And yeah, I can send a link to my video, but all I did was overlaid a frame that just covered up a few things, but it was basically the Zoom room gallery view underneath it.
George, real quick, we've got about 9 minutes for 12 questions. Yeah.
So I've experimented with for a gallery view of 4 record. So I think you answered the question, is just putting a frame in, but I've cropped out every person individually. I'm not sure it's going to work for live, but I want to be able to crop each individual individually to get single shots and just rebuild the entire show. But I guess I'll have to do it live.
And moving on, James in Dublin, does Zoom record breakout rooms? Does anybody know? Somebody want to give just a nod, yes or no? Chris Fenwick's giving us a thumbs up. So the answer is yes.
Yeah, they record locally.
Yeah, you have to figure out how to do it yourself because we're going to keep moving here. James from Dublin, I have several Zoom meetings lately where the attendees have complained that the image they are receiving are low quality. This seems to be only recent. All prior meetings were fine. Any reasons why? Does somebody want to try to remotely diagnose someone's quality downgrade? Jeffrey Powers will take a whack at it.
Just think of it. You're going to have a handful of ping pong balls and you throw them across the room. That's what's happening with Zoom right now. It's going back and forth. So quality is not going to be great. If it's coming from your end, if it's coming from somebody else's end, it's tough to say. That's the best I can say right there.
Yeah, a lot of in and out going on, and so who knows. John Krieger of Berkeley says, I hope we'll address how to preset breakout rooms. I'd like to have a variety of preset teams for my high school English classes. Is this possible to preset a breakout room and pre-assign people to it? Andy Carluccio.
You do have some options to pre-assign and pre-register people for breakout rooms. There are limits to that. Zoom describes that I'll put a link out for where you can find the information on this, but you can do it. There are some restrictions to be aware of, but generally speaking, you can pre-register people to auto-join into a specific room.
Nice. Okay. Peter Moore from Auckland, New Zealand says, I've heard a lot of talking about building a Zoom box. What is meant by that and how would I use it? They're talking about something like the Portal Plus, but for Zoom, is that what we're talking about, or are we talking about something else? Jeffrey Powers.
I think he's talking about the home kit. So basically, it's just a box that you would send to the person that you want to have on the show. That would include a camera, a microphone, an earpiece, and of course the machine that would then send it back, maybe 100-foot cable so they can plug directly in their router. So I have a feeling that's what he was talking about there.
And I imagine there are a ton of people all over the world trying to absolutely solve this in the best way possible. And we'll be hearing a lot about it over the course of time because everybody's trying to do that. Philip Cesaro of Brisbane, Australia says, question for Grant and anybody else in a location that generally doesn't have internet bandwidth infrastructure that the US has. How do you compensate for the overall slower speeds available in Australia?
Zoom surprisingly doesn't use a lot of bandwidth. Like it is actually pretty low. And so often if we can get a network cable to them, it makes such a big difference. And then if it really is terrible, we can try having their video off, and then if it's really, really bad, then we can just get them on the phone. And if we're getting them on the phone, they can join the Zoom meeting via phone call. And that can work fine. But yeah, generally with all the remotes I do, we are normally okay. If people have a 5 up and 5 down, well, not up, even if they have sort of 1.5, 2 or something, they generally are okay. So
okay,
your audio does seem to be arriving by Wombat right now, though.
Or koala transfer. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions and 5 minutes to do them. Am I right about? No, 4 minutes to do that. So let's keep moving here. Benjamin Anaput, suggestions on pulling ISO audio feeds from Zoom Live. Anybody tried to do that in the panel? There we got a lot of shaking heads. No, so it looks like
the only way to do that is to do what Alex does, where he sets up individual Zoom machines for each person, and a whole bunch of hardware and a whole bunch of audio, and a gold card at B&H, and you can do such a thing. Or you move in with Grant.
Yeah,
he's got a lot of gear. He could be a good friend to have.
Moving along, TJ Asher of Minneapolis. Can somebody put in a plea to Mr. Idelson to speak to somebody to have Zoom client remember the window positions when it jumps between breakout rooms and the main rooms? I don't expect that anybody has turned in this request ever before in the history of current Zoomification. John, do you want to even open the can of worms?
I would just say that Zoom listens, support zoom.us, and ask, and you may receive.
There you go. TJ Worrell, Zoom. Chris Fenwick, would you please explain your multi-ISO record technique?
Yeah, I mean it's a little involved, but I set up a Zoom room, which I learned how to do from Grant, and I set up the hardware. I'm about to buy an M4 Mac Mini so I can get 3 separate outputs. Those 3 separate outputs go into the ATEM Mini Pro ISO directly in there. I don't go through any monitors because it's the easiest way to hit one button and get multiple recordings, because the ISO will record every one of the inputs. So I get 3 out of one M4 Mac Mini. I will get 3 feeds, and in the Zoom Room software, you can pin those 3 different outputs, and Grant has stuff to add.
Very quickly, we're very close.
3 videos or 2 videos and a screen share?
3 videos. He's holding up 3 fingers, and so is John Idelson, which means we now are down to 3, and we've got 2 minutes given the multiple pages of Zoom panelists, says Prima Q in Motown. How are you able to see everyone in order to see raised hands? And since I'm looking for raised hands, you have to change the size of your gallery views and then try to get max. If we run into 2 pages because we have so many panelists, it's very hard to use that button on the right to switch to another group. Thankfully, we generally don't go over 48, so it hasn't been that big a problem, but it's hard. Moving on to George Kennedy Jr. of Washington, D.C. Chris, how are you getting your guests ready for successful Zoom ISO records?
You talk to them, and you sometimes have pre-meetings. I did a Zoom record with a very famous music personality. Grant helped me, and I spent an hour and a half with his technician before the talent ever walked in front of the camera.
And just be wary, everybody. We got one more question. We may get dumped out of this meeting right in the middle of it because we're right at the top of the hour. So how are you using Zoom Marketplace? Anyone? Prima Q asks from Motown. Anybody in the Zoom Marketplace thing yet? It is the last question, though. So if we get dumped out, at least we're at the end and we've successfully. So thank you all for being concise. I don't know when it's going to dump out. So we've got this last one. Anybody using the Zoom Marketplace? Let's keep going until we get knocked off the air.
I want to try it.
Sky wants to try it, but hasn't tried it.
Correct. Well, let's embrace the Zoomverse.
John Edelson and then Grant.
The California State Parks is using on Zoom for a number of events, and they've been very successful.
Nice. Grant, do you want to add